Coogs House. All right, it's time to talk things Big 12 and football. We got a football game this Friday. Say what?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can't step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can the latest on Cougs in your news feed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's good to see you again. And yes, you did see me just stumble over my words for a second. That's like the third time we've done that, so we're just going to keep doing that. Welcome back to the YouTube channel again. We're giving something away every 250 subscribers. We're at about 9:15-ish. We're like 9:12, 9:13 as we're recording this here. So remember, at 1,000, we're going to be giving something away. We're giving away, at this point, it's going to be a signed jersey by a player on the basketball team. It's made to be hung up. It's not actually like the authentic Jordan kind of stuff, but it is made to be hung up and signed by a player of the University of Houston basketball team. So make sure we give them away at 1,000. So to be entered, you'll be liking each and every video, hit that like button, and commenting down below. After talking about Houston Cougar football, spring ball, and baseball today, you have nothing else to say up with the Cougs, tell us down below, back in the day when not every search engine, or everyone had different search engines, which one did you use? I was an Ask Jeeves guy myself. All right. Now, the orchestration of today is going to be kind of simple. We're going to talk some about some comments that head coach Dana Holgorsen made about the football program on CBS Sports Radio on Monday. He does have a media availability on Tuesday after recording this episode, right? So, like, you might have heard more about that and more from him later. We're then going to jump into some stuff talking spring football game and kind of some letdowns about the spring football game, for being completely honest. And then in the third and final segment, we're going to do a quick hitter on baseball, no pun intended, but a quick hitter on baseball because, frankly, since the ending of the last recording, I should say, the last recording ended beforehand, some stuff happened in baseball in a good way for the program. All right, first, I want to point out that Dana Holgorsen got to speak to CBS Radio because the Final Four is in Houston. Then there's lots of extra sports media in Houston, and Dana is kind of a fun guy to talk to, or at least other people seem to think so. I think there's a lot of people on message boards and Twitter that have problems with Dana Holgorsen. He's kind of fun to listen to sometimes if he's not like running a program and going 8-5. And now, I will say that, admittedly, like when he's 12-2, he's a little bit more charming. I listened to that radio talk through and through twice, once like right after it came out, and then a second time trying to take notes to see how things went. And I have to say that the candor of Dana was kind of nice and relaxed in like the best way possible. And I think that was, he said some things that Houston Cougar fans really, really resonated with. Before I get to the meat and potatoes of it, I will say that he spoke some to the radio team about Clayton Tune, about how, he kind of pushed them back some when they said something about, like, how is Clayton Tune going to get drafted after a disappointing season? Like, he didn't have a disappointing season. We went 8-5, but Clayton Tune played fine and pointed out a bunch of statistical measures, as also point out, like, he was clutch and led game-winning drives in several of those close games, and frankly didn't get a chance to come back in a couple other close games because the other teams drove down the field and scored on Houston, right? He also praised him as a young person, talked about like families being close and yada, yada, yada. Really cool to see Coach Holgorsen stick up for Clayton. Also worth pointing out, like, that's the kind of thing young men listen to and think, hey, I can go play for that guy, right? Like that big picture is a big thing. Similarly, he spoke in just as glowing a manner about his quarterback at West Virginia, Geno Smith. You could kind of see his face light up when they asked him what he thought about Geno's year in the NFL this season. He immediately lit up and jumped into they wrote him off and he didn't write back quotes. Really, really cool moment for him. They asked him something about next season. He mentioned, they started like bypassing trade to the TCU game. He goes, no, UTSA is a good program. They're 24-4 in the last 2 years. Like, that's a good football team. But I think the big headliner was kind of twofold. One was a little tidbit about recruiting, and I think that at least offers some interesting insight. And the other was an interesting thing he said about the Big 12. He actually opened the radio segment with the Big 12 piece, so I'm working a little backwards here. But the recruiting thing I thought was short, sweet, and to the point, but really, really interesting when people talk about what this program looks like, because Houston gets ranked on their high school recruiting stuff in like the 50s on most recruiting sites as far as their class 2023 goes. But if you look at it, like what they have, everyone that they have coming in is either a 3 or 4 star, basically, right? There's like, it's a 16-person class, a 17-person class, and 16 of them are 3 or 4 star recruits. And so everyone's like, oh, Houston did such a bad, that's in the 2023 class, and you need to go into the Big 12, and blah, 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 blah. And like, admittedly, it'd be nice to have a bunch of 5 stars, right? Like that. I'm not saying that that's not true. Those guys exist in the city of Houston. They didn't come to the University of Houston necessarily. But he pointed out that his recruiting strategy in the modern landscape is to kind of do half and half high school kids and transfer kids, especially when you're moving into a new conference like Big 12. You want Big 12 caliber kids. And he says there are good high school kids in Texas, but it's still half of his recruiting feels like free agency. He mentioned he's going to dinner with recruits that are in the portal legally, right? Because they're in the portal, so he can go talk to them every other night for like he did the night before the interview, and then like the next 6 weeks. Like this is a continuing process for Dana and company. And worth pointing out too that like that's an interesting way to go about it. I think people look at the high school recruiting stats like, why aren't we getting all these kids from the city of Houston? And they did offer a bunch of 5-star kids, but they're also looking for a bunch of kids around the league, around the college football, that are looking to get into new places. Speaking of getting into new places like the Big 12, the most inflammatory and biggest comments I thought out of Dana, and it wasn't like incendiary, like you're gonna like hear about this all over the world, but he was quick to point out kind of the same thing a lot of other people have pointed out about Houston moving into the Big 12 is like it's kind of 30 years too late on the conference's part in a lot of ways, and it's nice to be moving, and it's nice to finally get there. Wish we could overlap with UT Austin and Oklahoma a little bit more, but and A&M at all would be nice, right? But on the whole, he goes back to 30 years ago when they created the Big 12 and Houston was left out. And he very bluntly put that the reasons for that were things like Vi Slamajama, Andre Ware, David Klingler, Carl Lewis, like athletes, historic level athletes coming through Houston. Houston creates the veer, right? Like things that happen at Houston that were not happening elsewhere. You also, and I would add to Dana, what Dana said here, had recruiting ground in Houston and big money donors in Houston and Big 12 people saying, we don't need them getting involved with what we're doing, right? Dana was blunt to point out that this was a Texas and Texas A&M led endeavor, right? And that like they didn't want to compete and deal with what Houston could be doing if they were brought into the fold in this major conference. So Houston got left out 30 years ago. And so you've seen the explosion of money in college athletics over that 30-year period. And Houston, unlike UT Austin, unlike Texas A&M, unlike Oklahoma, unlike Oklahoma State, heck, even unlike Baylor, Houston got left out in a way that other Power 5 schools did when that Power 5 conference got created. And they didn't get the big TV money contracts. They didn't get all those kind of deals. That means they didn't get facilities. That means they didn't get the recruits. That means they didn't get the wins. They didn't get the facilities. Like, all those kind of things played out and spiraled over the course of 30 years. And Dana, when asked about when those kinds of things start to change, actually took it back to, I'm also watching the men's final game, the national championship on the second screen here. So if my eyes are looking one way, sorry. He went back to 2008 and talked some about President Couture, Rhodes, Sumlin, and himself all got there in that same window in 2008, some right before the school year for different reasons. And obviously they got there in the spring football or whatever before. But and around that time, the university started to make this change and shift in direction. And here we are 15 years later. We went from Conference USA. Now we're looking at the Big 12 and looking to make noise in it, right? That's the shift in the program. And frankly, that took some intention, that took steps, and it wasn't a quick switch. Hey, we're just gonna go sign up and jump in, right? And it also points to it's not over. Just because you jumped in the Big 12 does not mean okay, now we're a power program and everything should be going our way. There are steps to be taken. I want to talk some of those steps in the second segment, and I'll get to them, I promise. But I also want to go to when asked more about they did make this big jump and what makes you unique to take this on or whatever. He talked about his experience at Tech and Oklahoma State and West Virginia as a program manager are really, really valuable because he knows what a Big 12 program is supposed to be like. He knows what a Big 12 program is supposed to look like. He knows what a Big 12 facility is supposed to look like. He knows what Big 12 recruits look like. However, he was also quick to point out that when it's third and long against TCU, third game of the season next season, being a former head coach at other Big 12 schools like West Virginia, or like the positional coaches he was at Oklahoma State and Tech or whatever, like that didn't really help him make that call. He's got to make the call with the kids he has on the field, right? So like it kind of goes both ways. It does help and it also doesn't help. I think that it does and doesn't help might rub some people the wrong way out of Dana, which, things Dana says typically tend to. But I will say that I appreciate the honesty out of it. I thought that he approached it head on. He mentioned the things that Houston does well. He also was historically accurate, as I see it, in reasons that Houston was left out of moving into the Big 12. I mean, it's no secret that Houston and SMU, having been in this conference with all these other schools from the Southwest Conference days, didn't get moved in the Big 12 because they're big city schools with big donor programs. And frankly, Houston had multiple sports involved, like he points out, where SMU had the Pony Express football part of that, right? Like the idea that Houston didn't get to make that jump is entirely because Texas and A&M and also Baylor, Oklahoma State, Arkansas, they didn't want to deal with the big city programs, and they didn't want to deal with big city donors and the potential like growth out of those programs that were combative. I also feel like, frankly, when Houston wins the Big 12 Conference football, which I am confident does happen someday. I don't know if it happens in 2023. I'd like it to happen in 2023, but I'm not putting money on. I'm putting my house on it, right? I will say that whenever that does happen, there's a great 30 for 30 style documentary to be made about all that, right? About what donors are saying, what behind closed doors, what handshakes got made, what handshakes didn't get made, all that kind of stuff, I think would make for a great, great documentary. And frankly, to Dana's credit, it's kind of what everyone in Houston's been saying since the move got announced, whenever that was, a couple years ago. And ever since that move got announced, everyone's been like, we should have been here the whole time. And some people are, the discussions now become how to win the Big 12 Conference and what does it take to win the Big 12 Conference. And, oh, well, we did it with, we competed with all those guys back in the Southwest Conference days. We can do it again. Or they'll talk to, incredible performances out of Samson's basketball program. Like, see, every program can do this with American Athletic Conference size resident. And like, it doesn't actually all work out quite like that. But I do think it's interesting to see like the excitement is there. The expectations are also, and like where Dana fits into like helping build the excitement. Does he also help himself out by meeting the expectations? He pointed out though that big gap did lead to some big gap. The big time gap did lead to some big financial gaps and otherwise. And I'll talk to some about what the impact of that might be in a very real, like visible sense this week in a moment. But first, I want to talk some also about Built Bar. Now, Built Bar is the best protein bar out there. It is around 17 grams of protein per bar, depending on which flavor you're going with, obviously. It's low in sugar, low in carbs, super high in protein, just 140 calories for most bars, and it's covered in real chocolate. I'm serious. It's real chocolate. So make sure you go find a box of Built Bars wherever you get your protein bars. My personal favorite, I'm going to say again, is the coconut almond. Coconut almond tastes a lot like an Almond Joy. I have a little bit of sweet tooth when it comes to Almond Joys. I like the chocolate nut aspect, like the idea of peanut butter and chocolate, whatever. Like that's kind of where I go, and that's kind of where I lean into. I also say that my wife loves the puffs. The puffs have like this marshmallowy interior, same kind of macros, same kind of flavor, same kind of real 100% chocolate on the outside. And I'm telling you to go get these Built Bars at built.com or at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. They have them in the pharmacy section. You get a 4-bar box at Walmart. I think they got the big 12 and 13-bar box, 12 or 13, I can't remember which it was. I don't have to go to Sam's Club. I go to Walmart. But that's where you can get them in person as well. Again, go get Built Bars at built.com or your local Walmart or Sam's Club today. Make sure you get a box of Built. All right. So I mentioned that Dana pointed out this big gap being made in athletics because you saw Houston get left out, and all these other programs moved in this, big TV contracts, and that simultaneously happened with the growth of sports. I mean, this is happening at the same time as sports marketing commercials and the Nikes of the world gets involved, and the tournament blows up on TV in a way that it hadn't before. Like the tournament goes, all 64 teams are televised, and conference tournaments end up becoming big deals in TV and basketball, conference championship games in football, the BCS, and all of those things happen while Houston's left out. And what that's led to is less revenue for things like facilities and less revenue for things like in-game experience for fans and less revenue for things like creating a football program that matches what Houston is capable of doing just by staying in and being the university of a city like Houston. And I think one noticeable way you look at that is, frankly, the spring football game we're talking about this Friday, right? This Friday, Houston will play their spring football game. Depending on what publication you're looking at, it might be a different time. Some say 6, some say 6:30. The original thing back in when the practice schedule first came out said 7. I'd say get there before 6 and have a soda pop or whatever while you're waiting around. But that's all happening this Friday. There's not been a whole lot of fanfare about it. I mean, honestly, there have been 3 different advertised times for it. There's not been a whole lot of fanfare about the game. And some people go to Dana for that. And I think there's probably some portion of the blame that goes there. But it's also indicative of this athletics department that is typically operated in a smaller conference. Moving into a Power 5 conference, you don't get to just do things like, we'll play the spring football game on Friday, whatever time we play it at. Like, no. If you have a spring football game as a Power 5 school, people are going to want to watch it. They're going to want to come. They're going to be there in person. They're going to be there on time, early, and stay late, be loud. And frankly, as a moneymaker, they're going to want to buy tickets. They're going to want to buy pops. They're going to want to buy popcorn. They're going to buy all those kinds of things, right? I just said pops. Something really is wrong. Maybe I got a headache. I don't know. But I also think it's interesting that Houston does not have their spring football game televised anyway. Now, it is a local public school. I don't mean to say that it's not, but I counted in a quick count across conferences on a couple different sites I was pulling up. 31 other major programs are having their spring game televised on some form of television. Now, I'm including the ESPN Plus of the world in doing that, admittedly. But in the Big Ten, you have 7 schools, Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers, Ohio State, Minnesota, all playing their games on the Big Ten Network. Okay? Makes sense. Big Ten Network, they space their games out accordingly, right? They have to fit into the TV schedule. The games are on the Big Ten Network. Penn State is also playing their game on like the Penn State TV station, right? Kind of like they have their own school network in the region or whatever, right? Baylor, TCU, and Oklahoma are all in the conference Houston's playing in next season and playing their spring games on ESPN Plus. BYU will be playing theirs on BYU TV, right? So like, the big local network there in Greater Salt Lake City area. Texas Austin will be playing theirs on the Longhorn Network, right? The Pac-12, you've got 3 schools playing on the Pac-12 network, Cal, Washington, and Oregon. Colorado, most notably here, is playing theirs on the real deal ESPN, not ESPN Plus, not ESPN2, ESPN, the Deion Sanders effect, right? The ACC has a couple different the NC State's playing on ESPN Plus, but Boston College, Miami, Clemson, Pitt, Virginia, Syracuse are all playing on North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest are all playing on the ACC network, right? Again, that's accessible wherever you are in the country. You can pull up your laptop, log in and watch. You can put on your devices, whatever you want, right? The SEC, right, has 8 schools that are simultaneously playing their stuff on ESPN Plus and the SEC network. So if you're a digital person watching it online, or if you have the big sports package, SEC network, you can watch it both ways. Georgia has their game televised on ESPN2. That's the perks of winning a natty, I guess. And then notable here to me, Marshall is playing their spring game on ESPN Plus. Notre Dame is playing theirs on Peacock. They got a deal there, right? USF from our American Athletic Conference is also playing on ESPN Plus, and then Georgia Southern is playing on ESPN Plus. And those are schools with much smaller athletic departments and budgets, you would think, than the University of Houston, finding ways to get their program on television. Now, again, a lot of people want to go to Dana on this, and Dana. There's plenty of things to be upset with Dana about. I think this is bigger and deeper, right? I think this is a bigger athletic department thing. I think Dana's going to play whatever degree of spring football game he's going to want to play, whether it's a half scrimmage, playing a live quarter, set plays, whatever, right? He would do that, and I don't think he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that cares a whole lot about who's in the stadium watching, right? He's going to do what he's going to do, and that's it. But why is no one trying to get this program on television? right? We have a quarterback battle happening, like a quarterback battle that we'll be detailing some tomorrow, and the stuff we know about it tomorrow. But everyone wants to watch this. They don't know who's taking snaps next fall, right? Everyone wants to see who the potential options are, and they want to see who their options are before the summertime happens, because if they don't like their option, they want to go get a transfer. Right? Like those things are things fans and people close to the program want to see, and they're making you go do it in person and also not actually telling you what time it starts. That seems not the best. That seems like not the best way to do this, right? I say that to say that I was shocked to see how small some of the schools with their games televised, even digitally, are. And I also have to say that I don't get, even if USF and Marsh, even though schools didn't have it, even if it was just in the Big 12, just TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma, BYU, and Texas and the Longhorn Network, I still think Houston needs to get put into that category, right? It's got the big city. It's got the big vibe. It's the new thing in town. And also, for what it's worth, like Dana Holgorsen's offense is fun to watch. That's why people across the country have a bigger obsession with Dana than I think many people realize. And I also feel like there's something about the quarterback battle that makes for natural drama on television, and they're not doing anything with it. I think it's a missed opportunity. I can't believe it's not happening. Yeah, I don't get the rationale behind not doing it. I understand that it would cost the TV crews and all that would cost money, but being in the Big 12, while you will make money, costs money. Scared money don't make none. You have to have the money involved to get the product out of it, right? Rant over, but that was frustrating to see. It's also frustrating to see because it was the kind of thing I thought we'd fix moving to Big 12, right? Just point blank, I thought we'd fix it by going to the Big 12. You see other schools will do their spring football game, and then when basketball season starts next year, they'll also do their midnight practice, right? Like, anyway, not unheard of to see these kinds of things happen, but it's not happening yet at Houston. In the third segment, I said I want to talk some about baseball results over the weekend. So let's jump on into those results. Houston did, in the series, beat East Carolina 2-1. On Friday, they won 5-4 in 10 innings. On Saturday, they lost 4-5. And then on Sunday, again, after I was done recording, they won 6-4. Now, I think that's important, as we talked about in the baseball program at our preview, or kind of catch-up session last week with Starnes, because now Houston sits at 14-14, right? 500 on the season, but more importantly, 2-1 in conference. In a conference that you probably have to win to have a real chance to make it to the regionals and so on. I want to do some couple shout-outs. One, obviously, the first one, the first shout-out I think we probably need to go with is that Nickens had the walk-off in the opener of the series in the 10th inning. Continues his hot play, was player of the week in the conference week before, had the 5 home runs in a single week we talked about beforehand. Continues, he was 2 for 2 in the game, and batted around Lopez to win the game on Friday. On Saturday, Houston did lose, but scored 4 runs. And frankly, in scoring the runs, scored 2 of them late in what felt like, is this 8th inning going to be kind of like the magical inning where Houston comes back and goes up 2-0 in the series? Did not, obviously, but valiant effort down the stretch there at the Houston Cougars. And then on Sunday, in a fun game, Houston goes up 3-0 early. Zach Arnold homers to the left. It feels like things are working well. Things are great in the 5th inning, right? And then things look like they might have fallen apart when by the end of the 7th inning, or top half of the 7th inning, East Carolina looked like they were back to being that nationally ranked powerhouse, an 8th ranked team in the country, and up 4-3. And if they win the series, they get out 2-1. They're feeling okay about themselves until bottom left. We had a home run, 3-run home run to kind of seal the deal there. Again, I don't mean to say there weren't any intense moments after the 7th inning, but I will say that that's a fun thing to keep track of. Houston Cougar baseball, folks, it is happening. Also, again, back at 500, they play Rice. I guess so. You're listening to this on Tuesday. They're playing Rice Tuesday night at home. So go down in Third Ward, cheer them on. Then they have a road trip this weekend at Wichita State. Road trip this weekend after the Final Four, after the NCAA tournament. It's probably why the spring game is also Friday, right? But cheer them on from afar at Wichita State. The games will be on ESPN Plus if that's your jam. And then they'll be back next week. I believe it's Tuesday of next week. Tuesday of next week to have Sam Houston at home before a homestand with South Florida next weekend. All right, so lots of baseball on the horizon and some very winnable games for them as they continue to make their trek, hopefully towards getting to a regional, and then we'll worry about Omaha and all that stuff down the line later. We're doing all of that worrying, though, here at Locked On Cougs. Make sure you subscribe down below and follow me at Painsworth512, Painsworth 512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all of the various social media handles. I'll be happy to talk all things Cougs, football, basketball, baseball. We're going to get into some softball, maybe after the spring game, we'll see. But we need to get there because they are playing sports as well. The spring sports kind of phenomenon stuff going on. Spring sports fitting in the show is kind of hard. It's primarily a football and basketball show for a number of different reasons. But all those kinds of things to get into. Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Cougs today, making us your first listen of the day. If you're looking for a second listen, the game is not over, but I'm watching the national championship in college basketball. And I can already tell you that in the morning, when this is over, I'm going to be listening to Locked On College Basketball. They're going to be wrapping it up and telling me all these crazy details I missed while I was kind of double screening here, looking back and forth. So make sure you go listen to Locked On College Basketball. Andy and I do a great job, year-long college basketball show. And it's not over when college basketball season's over either. So go make sure you listen to them and subscribe as well. Thank you all so much for listening to Locked On Cougs. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.